An intense debate tonight that you might find silly.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
I think a lot of newsmakers, movers and shakers, and high-profile people in the state would do well to take a note from Judge Steve Erickson, who is the vice chair of the State Board of Elections, because I have not ever had a situation where an inquiry was not met with a response. Such was the case yesterday on the radio when he stood in for my barrage on something that you might think is, well, not that important. It was the subject of a fierce debate here last night on the television over something that you might think is not that important. But doggone it, I'm going to go down in flames telling you it's important. So stay tuned for that tonight. Great to have you aboard. Thank you very much for tuning in to my state of mind. Some would say this thing is important, you know, impeachment. So the opening arguments have been literally revered by those on the left. I hate to do the left and right thing on the Democratic side, and Republicans are sneering at the Democratic case manager's presentation in the first full day yesterday of the trial because they think it's just rehashing the same old story. Some would suggest, can you believe this, that all 100 senators who preside here don't really know all the details of the case. I would guess that way. But remember, this case is about talking to the American public. In addition to those senators, here's the latest from the network.
Would you please be seated? Day 2 of opening arguments gets underway this afternoon. House Democrats spent roughly 9 hours Wednesday laying out their case against President Trump, arguing he withheld money from Ukraine in an attempt to hurt Joe Biden and help his 2020 re-election efforts.
The president went to extraordinary lengths to cheat in the next election.
They're trying to convince senators have no choice but to convict President Trump and remove him from office.
We have a constitutional responsibility to serve as a check and balance on an out-of-control executive branch.
The president's lawyers say they are eagerly awaiting their chance to rebut much of what they've heard.
We'll challenge aggressively the case that they're putting forward based on what we're hearing, and we also have an affirmative case that we're going to make as well, so we're going to do both.
For senators who are acting as jurors in this trial, the persuasiveness the arguments appears to depend on their political party.
Mr. Schiff and the other managers did an exceptional job laying out the facts of the president's alleged abuse of power and obstruction.
The House Democrats hate Trump. They want to change the election in 2016, kick a guy out of office that was duly elected, and they want to kick him off the ballot in 2020.
President Trump says the Democrats' presentation was loaded with lies and misrepresentations.
And what they have now is so flimsy, it absolutely should be dismissed.
President Trump set a personal record Wednesday, sending out 142 tweets, including dozens on impeachment.
Sometimes we move so fast and the reporting just kind of blows by us so quickly that we don't really focus on the that's incredible part of this. 142 tweets. First of all, President by Twitter should be horrifying enough. Never mind that. But it's just part of the rhythm now, and we just don't think about it very much anymore. Look, we tape the show in the early afternoon, so that becomes outdated. You're probably either checking in or have checked in or will check in tonight as the second full day of the presentation of the trial rolls on. I don't know if the Republicans are going to ask for a break on Saturday and start on Monday, because I'm not sure they've got 3 days worth of defense, you know, to fill the time. But this whole thing is coming down to witnesses and documents, and maybe not even necessarily to affect the outcome, which seems to be predetermined. I think the trial now is becoming on whether or not the trial was legit. And the voters' decisions in 2020 are going to be, meaning in the fall, are going to be affected by that. And I continue to tell you, I think the Republicans are just rolling the dice on not showing a trial. I'm not sure what they're afraid of. John Bolton's going to blow the whole thing up. Not if you're fixed on acquitting the president. But you could, again, win this battle and lose this war. By the way, hydration is important, and at the Senate, the only thing that's, nobody knew this, the only thing that is actually allowable by Senate rules on the Senate floor is milk. Because reportedly back in the day when they set the rule, they all had ulcers, and milk was good for the system. Frankly, if I had to sit there all day long, it would probably be Jack Daniels. And I don't even drink that stuff. Anyway, just a little tidbit for you. All right, coming back locally to a situation here that is really, really percolating and controversial, no doubt. Headline here, Convention Center won't comply with controversial Mattiello audit. Okay, follow this. So the head of security for the Convention Center is on suspension leave for a personnel issue. And there's some suggestion that there's some conflict between he, a male, and a female employee. I can't get into the middle of that. I wouldn't know. Those things are so difficult to iron out, right? But he's very close with the Speaker of the House. Voila, in the middle of this, the Speaker of the House decides that he's going to, on his authorization, direct the Auditor General, who works for the General Assembly, to do an audit of the Convention Center. Ironically, that's something that Republicans have been asking for forever because they don't believe the Convention Center operates properly. I don't happen to subscribe to that necessarily, but it's been their take. So why would the Speaker out of nowhere decide to do that? It's a big question. Here's how he responded in part to newsmakers earlier this week.
Did you violate the statute by ordering the audit?
No, we always operate through the chairman, like every board across the country
We should
does.
point out you're the chairman.
I'm the chairman of the committee. I inquired of one person, and I was told that it was basically a personnel matter, and I had no other involvement with that.
Here's the problem. Here's the problem. The Speaker heads up a 5-member board called the Joint Committee on Legislative Services. That is the organizational body that runs the General Assembly. It's really more theory than practice because the 5 members haven't met more than twice in like the last 175 years or something like that. But it's 3 Democrats, 2 Republicans. The chair is the Speaker of the House. So if the JCLS is acting on anything, it has been just the Speaker's purview, I guess, to just order it under the auspice of the JCLS. Well, this guy, Blake Filippi, who was on the show just recently, who is the House Minority Leader, just took on the Speaker by leveling a lawsuit against the Speaker for not including he and the others who are on the JCLS from taking part in the authorization of the audit against the Convention Center. Are you following this? So the lawsuit gets announced late yesterday, and today the Convention Center board meets, and it said, you know what, we're not going to comply. George Nee of the AFL-CIO spoke at the meeting.
The Auditor General shall have the power, when requested by a majority of the committee, to make post-audits and performance audits of accounts and records of any other public body based on that law. I would make a motion that we not comply with this audit request from the Auditor General until there is a majority vote of the Joint Committee on Legislative Services.
Makes sense to me. Speaker Mattiello, late this morning, decided to withdraw his request or directive to the Auditor General to perform that audit. And he says that Blake Filippi made it a political circus, I think. Stay tuned. This one might be bigger than the Speaker hopes. When we come back, a fierce debate. I mean fierce. I wouldn't go anywhere. Stay with us. You don't need my taxpayer money incentivizing you to wake up.
I think I know what your wife needs to get you for your birthday.
What?
Book on meditation. You need to chill. You know, this is a very common
this drives me
minimalist
nuts.
approach to encourage. Why?
More voting
is always better. More voting is always better.
Why?
Because you don't have true democracy if the majority of people stay home.
It's about this headline that we posted last night. Rhode Island Board of Elections, what is it, looking for I voted submissions. The vice chair of the Board of Elections is a former district court judge for a couple of decades. As I said, always up for the battle. I think you and Camerano are going to gang up on me here.
Well, maybe.
Welcome.
It's great to be back
Good to
again.
see you.
Yeah.
Here's my simple premise. The I voted sticker. Didn't you bring?
I brought some examples.
Throw that at the camera. We don't have to get fancy.
That's that's one.
You pulled that off the internet.
I pulled this off. This is.
I made a difference. So
can you. Ohio.
Ohio.
Yeah. And these are the New York City ones.
I voted.
Well, they have different colors, and they have white ones, and they have all the.
Isn't that nice?
Isn't that nice?
It's beautiful.
Isn't that great? Wouldn't you like to have that on your lapel?
What else you got there? Anything else? Any other creative stuff? Is that?
I've got one that somebody posted, a Rhode Island one. It's kind of nice.
So you're looking. The story was that the Board of Elections is using some nominal taxpayer money to look for creative ideas. You want to run a little contest for someone to creatively produce the I voted sticker for this general election.
That's right.
It's like $5,000 to have the stickers. I mean, it's not like the first. You've had stickers, but they've been pretty traditional.
We buy
generic.
stickers. They're generic stickers. There are companies that do this. They produce them by the roll. They look like stamps, and you just peel them off, and people get them at the election, and they walk out of the voting area, and they're excited to say they voted.
So now you want some fancy schmancy Rhode Island specific stuff. Whose brainstorm was this?
Well, the proposal came from one of our staff members, Miguel Nunez, who's actually one of the experts on, not on voting stickers.
I was going to say, he actually has a degree in voting stickers.
No, but he's the guy that leads the risk limiting audits, and he's done a tremendous job.
The risk limiting
audits that we do at the end of that we're now doing at the end of the election.
What does that mean?
That confirms that the votes that were run through the machine are equivalent to the actual votes that were cast. And so we do an analysis after the election. We're the leading states in the country using this technology. We are national leader in risk limiting audits. And Miguel is one of the fellows that really put the whole thing together. So he came up with this idea. It's been kicked around before. John Marion's proposed it. Nick Lima from Cranston.
Yeah, I'm getting after Marion on this one too.
Okay, I heard that.
He's another one of my good government heroes for common cause.
Right.
But he likes this idea too. Here's my point, and I want to make this for you seriously, because I don't play around here. We might laugh at ourselves every once in a while. I really believe that these stickers are. Well, I never wear one. I'm not a sticker guy. I'm not a bumper sticker guy, so it's not my style. But the idea that you prance around with one of these stickers after you vote, I don't know, entertaining. But the idea that it actually is an election day promotional tool is what bothers me most. I don't mind, by the way, if you're advertising, even with taxpayer dollars, orientations on bond issues, which is really kind of a Secretary of State function.
Secretary of State puts out that booklet.
Right. But the Board of Elections, to me, has always been a regulatory, count the vote, almost election law enforcement body.
Right.
And I thought you guys were in horrendous shape a handful of years ago, and it has improved significantly. Your systems, your authority, the way you're doing business, your cases, your disposition of cases, your diligence seems to really have stepped up a notch. So, kudos on that. I just think you're out of your lane with this idea that you want to promote the voting. Look, if what bothers me most overall in life is the low IQ voter. Not the one who agrees with me. I mean just the low IQ voter who doesn't know who the candidates are, doesn't know what the bond question is. And so if I'm, going through Dave's supermarket with my I voted sticker on, and someone goes, "Oh my God, that's right, I have to vote today," who had no interest in doing that, or what? What? I mean, what are you doing? You're promoting a low quotient voter, and you're using my taxpayer money to do it. That is unnerving to me.
Well, we've been doing it for years because we always hand
It's
out
always been unnerving to me.
Okay. Well, just to clarify, what we're talking about is not a change in policy because we've always handed out I voted
No, but you're
stickers.
stepping up a little bit of spending money to make it all creative
Very
and fun.
tight. We could probably have a bake sale and pay for it.
This is not about the money, by the
So,
way. It's
okay.
about the concept.
All right, all right. But the concept is that we feel that it's our responsibility. I think this is a fair statement when I say we. Sometimes I'm speaking for myself. Sometimes, I'm speaking on behalf of the board. But I think that the board in general felt like it was a good idea to promote people voting. I think we have always done that to a certain extent. And this is just a small change in policy to give people a little bit more enthusiasm about elections because we have terrible turnout statistics. We're probably, I think we're last in New England. We're below average nationally in terms of people coming out to vote. That shouldn't be. It isn't an aspect of urbanization.
Have you studied why that is?
Well, it's not urbanization.
It's certainly not because people missed the sticker, is it?
No, but there are studies that say that sometimes that has an impact. It's a sociological phenomenon that apparently exists out there that people like to be parts of groups, and when they see these stickers, they might say, "Oh yeah, I forgot that today's election." That doesn't mean they're a low IQ voter. It means they may be busy with childcare, they may be busy with their jobs. There are a lot of reasons people don't vote. But if we can, and I've always thought that...
Judge, there are not a lot of people that forget it's election day.
Well, the problem
and if they forgot it's election day or didn't know it's election day, why don't we just keep the secrets?
Well,
don't tell them.
But that kind of goes against the principle of democracy. Everybody can vote. Everybody should
My
vote.
opinion's anti-democratic.
No, I didn't say that.
What is it?
Okay. I think that it is an opinion that suggests that some votes are more valuable than others. If somebody has paid attention to the race and has followed it closely, that they're a better voter than somebody else.
They are.
I disagree.
Listen, in God's eyes, you and I are equal, and so is everybody watching this show.
Right.
In terms of the quantitative number of votes, your vote and my vote are absolutely equal.
But you're not normal. I'm not normal. The people that watch this show aren't normal. The people that pay close attention to the elections in that respect aren't your average voter. Most people are focused on other activities. They're focused on their family, their home, their neighborhood. And so they don't necessarily pay as close attention to all these issues as we do. And that's just the reality of how the democratic system works.
I'll tell you, people stand in line for hours and hours in countries that finally give them the vote. The oppression in this world and the non-democratic environments that people live in are something that we should never not recognize. And this vote that we have, this right that we have to vote, should never be taken for granted.
Right.
If you do so, I don't need to help you.
Well, we have one of the lowest turnouts in the world in terms of voter turnout. Rhode Island is below average in the nation.
You sure this isn't some kind of Democratic Party scam here? Just
by the
trying
League
to...
of Women Voters, by Common Cause?
Well, Common Cause, I might give them a pass, but the League of Women Voters is definitely a Democratic organization in this state.
Well, I think that
because the whole place is flavored that way. It's all about the democratic system.
Well, that's not how I came up with
I'm trying to inure
system.
some comfort with those people who have been bothered by my positions on Donald Trump for the last 2 years. I'm trying to make a comeback. I'm trying to make a comeback with those folks.
Well, my political history is in the Republican Party.
Right.
So, I was a state rep for 8 years.
Well, at the end of the day, I'm not going to win this argument.
No, you're not.
and I might take Joe's recommendation to do some more meditation. Look, by and large, the Board of Elections has been really pretty much on its game, and I thank you for whatever role and significant role you've played in that. But I just hope that whenever new creative initiative you guys think about, that you don't get too out of your lane, because you have a regulatory, sometimes investigative, and prosecutorial role,
right.
And I don't want you to get out of that you've established pretty competently.
That's a fair comment and a fair criticism, and I respect that. and I will take that to heart.
Now, where they do it is still up in the air, I think. Let's find out where the new Board of Elections place is going to be. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
I have that information.
Good. All right, so the Board of Elections wants to move out of this dump, right, on Branch Avenue. It's become, what, inefficient for you?
It's become impossible. The heating systems failed, electrical systems are failing.
How old is that building?
Who knows? We don't really know.
And no one in Rhode Island knows where it is.
It used to be a Mack truck facility, so it's just totally inappropriate for our current needs. So
I bet you, the way you know where that is, it's where the Benny's, it's around the corner from where the Benny's used to be, because that's where everything in Rhode Island is,
well,
where something used to be.
Right, well, the Benny's used to be where the Board of Elections used to be, so as of February 10th.
Right, of this year.
Of this year.
You will be, you know, now people will be, when people are like giving directions to who it's, oh, my friends at Nikki's Liquors, they're right down the road. Hey, you know, go to Nikki's Liquors, well, it's where the Board of Elections used to be, right?
Right.
You're going to Cranston, is that thing figured out yet? Because there's been some dispute and some serious
well, there's
queries.
a lawsuit pending, but we were allowed to go forward with moving into
That Joe
the facility.
Paolino's lawsuit?
Yes.
Yes. He believes that he didn't have a fair shot in bidding. What's your 30-second answer on that one?
We think it was done completely according to rules and regs. He had the highest bid for the least amount of space.
So you're going to Cranston?
Yes.
In the state area right there?
No.
No.
It's Plainfield Pike.
On the Plainfield Pike?
Right.
Huh.
And it has parking.
And it's going to be where what used to be? It's got to be. You got to give me a reference.
I don't know what used to be there.
Well, you can't come here and not know where the new place is next to what used to be.
I don't know. I'm sorry. That's.
And you're 0 for 2. These stickers and not knowing where they used to be is. I'm not sure about this show today.
But we do have a nice new facility.
More publicly accessible?
Yes, much more publicly.
You think what? It's centrally located?
Well, it's centrally located in the sense that more cities and towns, town halls, are closer to that facility than they are to the Branch Avenue facility.
And give me a short answer if you can. What facility, technical or operational improvement will you inure by moving there?
We will have a much more public access, a bigger conference room, training facilities, and we'll be able to put all of our equipment under one roof for the first time in many, many years.
Concerned about the 2020 election at all, nationally, with the stuff that's going on, Russia, this, that, the other thing, what?
We're very concerned about that. We have been working hard on the cybersecurity side. There's not much we can do about the disinformation campaigns, except to make sure that people get accurate information about the election, when it's held, and where they're supposed to vote. Confidence
Level that the vote will be authentic and accurate?
99.999.
Okay.
I really do have that level of confidence. There's always a risk. You never eliminate all risk, but I think that we have worked hard to eliminate every risk that we can possibly see.
Deadline for the I voted ideas? What is it, quickly?
They haven't published the rules yet. A couple of weeks, probably.
Get your creative juices
flowing.
flowing.
Get your creative juices
Voters.
flowing. Yes.
Thanks, Judge.
Okay.
Final word and we come back. Check this out. Mr. Judge Erickson left this for me. Some economic guy said the following: people like being seen voting, but people also like being seen having voted. Just study up on the issues, and we'll call it even, Steven. We'll see you tomorrow night, and on the radio at 3 on WPLO. Bye.